Ladies and gentlemen, prepare to be moved by a tale unlike any other. Today, we bring you The Unfavored Son, a story that defies expectations and challenges the very definition of family love. Imagine a young man cast aside and denied his rightful share, yet harboring no bitterness. Instead, he quietly builds an empire from scratch. But when tragedy strikes his family, will the son they ignored become their unlikely savior? This isn't just a story. It's a profound journey of sacrifice, redemption, and the unbreakable bonds that truly define a family. Before we begin, please consider subscribing and pressing that like button to join our community. Let's dive in. The old manor house of the von Kaelen family stood like a silent, brooding sentinel on the hill, its gray stone walls echoing centuries of whispers, but few of them seemed to belong to young Kael. At 10 years old, Kael was a study in quiet observation, a stark contrast to the boisterous laughter that often spilled from his older siblings, Ilara and Matthias. While Ilara, with her cascading golden curls, and Matthias, sturdy and boisterous, were often found clinging to their mother's flowing skirts or wrestling playfully with their father, Kael was a solitary figure, often found in the dusty corners of the vast family library, his nose buried in ancient tomes. He was a creature of subtle shades, his hair the color of tarnished silver, his eyes a deep, unsettling gray that seemed to absorb more than they reflected. There was an unnerving stillness about him, a quiet dignity that belied his tender years. Yet it was this very stillness that seemed to make him invisible to those who mattered most. The air in the von Kaelen home, usually thick with the scent of aged wood and lavender, often carried an unspoken chill for Kael. It wasn't overt cruelty, never a raised hand or harsh word. It was far more insidious, a subtle current of detachment that flowed specifically around him. His parents, Lord and Lady von Kaelen, were pillars of their community, revered for their generosity and wisdom. They doted on Ilara and Matthias with an open affection that was as natural as breathing. For Kael, however, their love felt like a distant, flickering candle, its warmth never quite reaching him. A gentle pat on Ilara's head would morph into a fleeting, almost hesitant touch on Kael's shoulder. A hearty laugh from Matthias's clumsy antics would soften into a polite, almost bewildered smile for Kael's thoughtful remarks. He yearned for their smiles, for the easy acceptance his siblings received, but learned early on that chasing it was like chasing a ghost, always just out of reach. He remembered a particularly vivid autumn afternoon, the scent of burning leaves clinging to the air. Ilara had painted a clumsy landscape, a riot of greens and browns. His mother had praised it profusely, her eyes alight with pride, proclaiming it a masterpiece worthy of framing. Kael, with painstaking detail, had sketched the intricate patterns of a dragonfly's wing, capturing its iridescent beauty with startling accuracy. He timidly presented it, his small heart thrumming with a rare hope. His father, Lord Alaric, had merely glanced at it, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, before offering a polite, "Competent, Kael, very competent." The word, though not unkind, had landed like a cold stone in his chest, extinguishing the fragile spark of hope. Competent. It felt like a condemnation of his very existence, a perpetual state of being good enough but never truly cherished. This quiet disparity wasn't born of malice, Kael often mused, but rather a bewildering, almost unconscious predisposition. Perhaps it was his introspective nature, so unlike their own vibrant temperaments. Perhaps it was simply the unspoken expectation that he, the youngest, would somehow manage, would find his own way without their overt intervention. This unspoken belief, however, had the cruel effect of creating a chasm, separating him not just from their affections, but from the very idea of belonging. The grand dining hall, usually filled with the clinking of silverware and animated conversation, was unusually somber that fateful evening. A heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the crackling of the hearth. Lord and Lady von Kaelen sat at the head of the long oak table, their faces etched with an unfamiliar solemnity. Kael, seated at the furthest end, felt a prickle of unease. Alara fidgeted with her napkin, and Matthias, usually so boisterous, was unusually quiet. Then, Lord Alaric cleared his throat, the sound resonating through the tense room. "Children," he began, his voice deeper than usual, "your mother and I have made a decision regarding the family's assets, a decision that we believe is for the best, for the future of the von Kaelen line." Kael's heart gave a strange lurch. He braced himself, though for what, he wasn't entirely sure. He had always known, deep down, that his fate would be different. Lord Alaric continued, his gaze sweeping over Alara and Matthias, lingering for a beat before skipping over Kael entirely. "The ancestral lands, the manor house, and the majority of our financial holdings will be divided between Alara and Matthias. They will oversee the family's legacy, ensuring its continuation." A cold dread seeped into Kael's bones. He felt the blood drain from his face, but he kept his gaze steady, fixed on the polished top table. There was no mention of him. No inheritance, no land, no share. It was as if he were not even present, a ghost at his own family's most pivotal moment. A silent, searing wave of disbelief washed over him, followed by a profound, chilling realization. This wasn't merely a lack of affection. It was a deliberate, calculated omission. Alara and Matthias exchanged quick, triumphant glances, though they quickly tried to compose themselves. Kael could feel their gaze flick toward him, a mixture of awkwardness and a flicker of pity. But Kael offered no reaction. Not a gasp, not a tear, not even a flinch. His face remained a placid mask, mirroring the quiet dignity that defined him. The silence that followed Lord Alaric's pronouncement was deafening, amplified by Kael's uncanny stillness. Finally, Lady Isabella, her voice surprisingly soft, added, "Kael, my dear, you are resourceful. We believe you have the spirit to forge your own path, unburdened by the responsibilities of the estate." Unburdened? The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. It was a thinly veiled justification for an act of profound exclusion. Kael looked up, his gray eyes meeting his mother's for a fleeting moment. He saw not malice, but a strange blend of conviction and perhaps a touch of unspoken guilt. "I understand," Kael said. His voice, when it finally came, was clear and steady, devoid of any tremor or accusation. It was a single, simple phrase that resonated through the room, cutting through the tension. It was a phrase that offered no resistance, no argument, no plea. It was an acceptance so complete, so unyielding, that it stunned his family into a deeper silence. They had expected anger, sorrow, or at least a question. Instead, Kael merely nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible tilt of his head. He rose from the table, his movements deliberate, unhurried. He didn't slam the door or storm out in a fit of rage. He simply walked away, leaving behind the hushed whispers and the stunned faces of his family. As he ascended the grand staircase, each step a quiet declaration of independence, the flickering candle on the landing cast his silhouette against the wall, a lone figure moving towards an unknown future. The manor house, with its ancient whispers, now held one more secret, the profound, enigmatic silence of its unfavored son. And as the night deepened, the question hung heavy in the air, a captivating mystery. What would Kael, unburdened by legacy, truly become?
The heavy oak door of the Von Kaelen manor closed behind Kael with a soft click, a sound that seemed to seal his past within its ancient walls. Yet, it wasn't a prison door, it was a gate. He stepped onto the cobblestone path, not with the hurried pace of one fleeing, but with the measured gait of a man setting out on a deliberate journey. The autumn air, crisp and biting, seemed to sharpen his senses, clarifying the path ahead. He clutched nothing but a small, worn leather satchel containing a few essentials and the quiet, unwavering resolve that had long been his closest companion. No coin, no property, just the weight of his own breath in his lungs and the vast, unexplored world stretching before him. His destination was the capital, a sprawling city of whispers and opportunities, far from the familiar, yet suffocating embrace of his ancestral lands. The journey was arduous. He walked for days, his sturdy boots wearing thin, his clothes growing threadbare. He slept under the vast, star-dusted canopy of the sky, the cold earth his bed, the rustling leaves his lullaby. Hunger gnawed at him, a constant, dull ache, but he found a strange clarity in its demands. Every step, every foraging for wild berries, every sip of cold stream water was a lesson in self-reliance, a stark contrast to the pampered existence of his siblings. He saw the world through new eyes, not as a birthright, but a challenge to be conquered, a tapestry woven with threads of hardship and resilience. Upon reaching the city, Kael found himself swallowed by its sprawling maw. Its towering buildings seemed to mock his provincial upbringing, its cacophony of street vendors and horse-drawn carriages a stark antithesis to the silent corridors of the manor. He was a nameless face in a sea of millions, a phantom flitting through alleyways, seeking work, any work, to keep the hunger at bay. He toiled as a stable boy, shoveling manure with a quiet efficiency that surprised his gruff employer. He washed dishes in bustling taverns, his hands raw from the caustic lie, his mind perpetually racing, observing, absorbing. He carried heavy sacks of grain at the docks, his slender frame straining, his muscles aching with a fatigue he'd never known. Each grueling task, each drop of sweat, was a brick laid in the foundation he was determined to build. "You're a quiet one, lad," grumbled Master Theron, the owner of the bustling dockside warehouse where Kael found consistent, albeit backbreaking, work. Theron, a barrel-chested man with eyes like chipped flint, had seen countless young men come and go, broken by the unforgiving rhythm of the docks. Yet, Kael, despite his seemingly delicate appearance, possessed an uncanny endurance. Never complain, just work. Kael merely offered a small, polite nod, the corner of his lips turning up in a ghost of a smile. He knew he was different. While others grumbled about their paltry wages or the oppressive heat, Kael's mind was a ceaseless loom, weaving observations into potential opportunities. He noticed the inefficiencies in the warehouse, the wasted movements, the poorly organized shipments. He began, subtly at first, to implement small changes, a more logical stacking method here, a quicker way to secure a crate there. His actions spoke louder than any words. Theron, a shrewd businessman beneath his gruff exterior, noticed. He saw the ledger entries subtly improve, the flow of goods become smoother. One sweltering afternoon, as the sun beat down on the docks like a blacksmith's hammer, a critical shipment of rare spices arrived, its manifest illegible. The other workers stood around, scratching their heads, anticipating delays and penalties. Kael, however, quietly approached the crates, his gray eyes scanning the symbols and half-erased markings. He had spent countless hours in the manor library, not just reading tales of knights and dragons, but poring over old trade manifests, learning the arcane symbols of various merchant guilds.
These are from the Eastern Isles, Master Theron, Kael stated calmly, pointing to a faint, faded symbol. They require specific temperature and humidity. If left out, they'll spoil within 3 days. The destination is the Royal Apothecary. Theron's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine surprise in their depths. How in blazes do you know that, boy? I read, Kael replied, a rare, almost shy smile touching his lips. And I observe. From that day forward, Kael's role shifted. He moved from the brute force of manual labor to the precision of logistics. He organized manifests, tracked shipments, and even negotiated minor deals with frustrated merchants. His mind, once confined to dusty books, found its true arena in the chaotic symphony of commerce. He learned the rhythm of the market, the ebb and flow of supply and demand, the subtle art of negotiation. The whispers of the city that once overwhelmed him now became a language he understood, a song of opportunity. His living conditions improved, though he maintained a Spartan existence. A small, rented room above a bakery, where the scent of warm bread offered a comforting aroma. He saved every copper, penny by penny, like a miser guarding his treasure. He still frequented libraries, but now they were public ones, filled with maps, economic texts, and historical accounts of great trading empires. He was no longer just learning, he was preparing. He was building his own private arsenal of knowledge, a silent weapon against the odds stacked against him. Yet, despite his burgeoning success, a flicker of introspection remained. He rarely thought of his family with bitterness, but sometimes, in the quiet solitude of his room, an ache would stir within him. It was not for the lost inheritance, but for the lost connection, the absence of a warmth he had glimpsed but never truly felt. He wondered if his parents ever spoke of him, if his siblings remembered the quiet boy who had vanished. He imagined Alara thriving in the manor, hosting grand parties, and Matthias commanding the fields and forests, his laugh echoing across the ancestral lands. Their lives, so different from his own, remained a distant, almost mythical landscape. He was building his own kingdom, brick by painful brick, in the harsh, unforgiving city, far from the cushioned embrace of inherited wealth. One evening, a man named Silas approached Kael. Silas was a grizzled merchant, his face a roadmap of hard living, known for his vast network but limited capital. He had observed Kael's quiet efficiency, his uncanny ability to foresee market trends. Kael, Silas began, his voice a low rumble. I have a proposition. A large shipment of rare silks from the Orient. The demand is immense, but I lack the funds to secure it. With your foresight and my connections, we could make a fortune. It was a gamble, a colossal risk. Kael had saved diligently, but this venture would consume nearly every coin he possessed. He looked at Silas, a man whose honesty was as well known as his rough edges, and he looked at the proposition, a shimmering mirage of immense profit, but also ruin. This was his moment. This was the chasm between competent and conqueror. The air in the small, cramped office felt suddenly thick with unspoken potential, a crucible heating up around Kael. He thought of his parents' pronouncement, "You are resourceful." He thought of the empty seat at the dining table. This was not about proving them wrong, not anymore. This was about proving himself, to himself. What's the catch, Silas? Kael's voice was steady, betraying none of the tremor in his hands. Silas chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. No catch, lad, just risk. High risk, high reward. If it fails, we both lose everything. If it succeeds, we change our stars. Kael closed his eyes for a moment, picturing the intricate patterns of the silk, the bustling market, the satisfied customers. He saw not just profit, but a step towards something larger, something he couldn't yet name.
This was it, his true beginning. "I'm in," Kyle said, opening his eyes, a new fire igniting in their gray depths. "But I have a condition. I want to be involved in every aspect of the trade, from negotiation in the East to distribution here. I want to understand every thread of this business." Silas raised a bushy eyebrow, a slow smile spreading across his face. "A true merchant, aren't you, boy? Not just a financer." "Agreed." The following months were a whirlwind of frantic activity. Kyle, with Silas's connections, navigated the treacherous waters of international trade. He learned to haggle in smoky back rooms, to read the subtle nuances of a vendor's facial expression, to identify the genuine from the fake. He slept even less, fueled by ambition and an insatiable hunger for knowledge. He traveled to distant ports, his quiet demeanor masking a sharp mind and an uncanny ability to connect with people from all walks of life. He was a chameleon, adapting to every new environment, absorbing its lessons. The climax of this nascent empire building arrived when the first ships, laden with the prized silks, docked in the capital's bustling port. The news had spread like wildfire. A new source of exotic goods was arriving. The market was hungry. Kyle stood on the docks, watching the massive ships, their sails furled, their hulls brimming with his gamble. The sun, a golden orb, cast long shadows across the water, mirroring the stretch of time and effort he had poured into this moment. This was it, the moment of truth. When the silks were unveiled, their vibrant hues shimmering under the afternoon sun, a collective gasp swept through the eager crowd of buyers. The quality was unparalleled, the price competitive. The whispers of the city transformed into a clamor, then a frenzy. Orders poured in, overwhelming them. Within weeks, the entire shipment was sold out, generating a profit far beyond Kyle's wildest dreams. He stood in his modest office, the ledger open before him, the numbers a testament to his unwavering will. He wasn't just competent anymore, he was a force. The small room, once a symbol of his solitary existence, now felt like the command center of a burgeoning empire. He had taken nothing and forged everything. He had faced the wilderness of his own ambition and emerged victorious. The old manor, with its echoing silence, seemed a distant, almost faded dream. He had built his own fortress, not of stone, but of intellect, resilience, and unwavering resolve. This was just the beginning. The seed of selflessness had taken root, not in the fertile soil of inherited wealth, but in the harsh, unforgiving ground of true independence. He wondered, for a fleeting moment, if they would ever know, or if they ever cared. But the thought, like a wisp of smoke, quickly dissipated, replaced by the exhilarating hum of purpose. He had no time for past grievances. The future was calling, and he was ready to answer. Years flowed like a silent river, carrying Kyle further from the manor, yet etching its memory deeper into his being. His enterprise, born from ambition and nurtured by meticulous strategy, had blossomed into a formidable trading empire. Warehouses now stood tall, stretching like silent giants along the city's bustling docks, their interiors brimming with exotic goods from every corner of the known world. His name, Kael, whispered with respect in merchant guilds and hushed tones among competitors, had become synonymous with integrity and ingenuity. He possessed wealth beyond the wildest dreams of his childhood self, and a quiet confidence that settled deep in his gray eyes. Yet the old manor, with its echoing silence, remained a distant, almost forgotten melody in the symphony of his success. He rarely thought of his family now, not with bitterness, but with a detached sense of finality, as if they belonged to a past life. The world Kael inhabited now was one of shrewd negotiation and strategic expansion. His days were a tapestry of meetings, manifests, and market forecasts. His nights, though often solitary in his tastefully modest city residence, were filled with the quiet satisfaction of self-made achievement.
He had forged his destiny with his own hands, unburdened by inherited privilege, and in doing so, had found a profound sense of purpose. He had no grand social ambitions, no desire for titles or recognition from the aristocratic circles his family frequented. His true wealth lay in the freedom of his own making. Then the world shifted. It began with a cryptic, urgent summons, a letter sealed with the familiar, though long unseen, crest of the von Kaelen family arrived at his city office. Kael recognized the delicate script on the envelope as Alara's, a stark contrast to the usual formal correspondence he received. He opened it, his brow furrowing as he read. The words blurred into a frantic plea, a desperate cry for help. Mother, gravely ill, kidneys failing, prognosis grim. Father, ruined. A cold tremor ran through Kael, not fear for himself, but a strange, unsettling chill. The von Kaelen family, once an untouchable fortress of wealth and status, was crumbling. The news was like a thunderclap, shattering the placid surface of his carefully constructed life. He immediately dispatched his most trusted clerk to gather more information, while he himself wrestled with the implications. The reports that followed were bleak. Lady Isabella, his mother, had been diagnosed with a severe kidney ailment. Doctors, brought from the finest clinics across the continent, offered little hope. A transplant was her only chance, a desperate gamble against time. Concurrently, Lord Alaric, his father, had fallen victim to a devastating financial collapse. A series of ill-advised investments, coupled with unexpected political turmoil, had seen their vast fortune evaporate like morning mist. The ancestral lands, once secure, were now heavily mortgaged. The manor, a symbol of their enduring legacy, teetering on the brink of foreclosure. Matthias, burdened by the sudden weight of responsibility, was frantically trying to salvage what remained, while Alara, accustomed to a life of ease, was reportedly distraught and overwhelmed. Kael sat in his office, the grim details laid out before him like a morbid map. The contrast was stark, almost ironic. Here he was, the unfavored son, now a titan of industry, and there they were, the privileged, facing utter ruin. There was no sense of triumph in him, no bitter satisfaction. Instead, a complex, almost melancholic emotion stirred. It was the echo of a forgotten yearning, a distant empathy for the pain of those who had once cast him aside. He pictured his mother, once vibrant, now frail, his father, once imperious, now broken. The image, though faded by time, stirred a reluctant sense of duty. He decided to visit, not to gloat, not to demand, but simply to see. He traveled alone, leaving his bustling empire behind, reverting, in a way, to the solitary traveler he had been years ago. The journey back to the manor felt like stepping through a portal into a forgotten dream. The familiar winding roads, the ancient trees, the silhouette of the gray stone manor house against the twilight, it was all exactly as he remembered, yet profoundly changed. The air around the manor now carried a different chill, not of indifference, but of despair. He found his father in the library, hunched over a desk piled with papers, his face gaunt, his shoulders slumped. Lord Alaric, once a man of formidable presence, now seemed diminished, a statue eroded by the harsh winds of misfortune. He looked up, his eyes wide with surprise, then a flicker of shame as he recognized Kael. "Kael," his father whispered, his voice hoarse, I didn't expect you." Kael merely nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I heard." The silence that followed was thick with unspoken regrets, with the weight of years of neglect. Lord Alaric finally broke it, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your mother, she's fading. The doctors say only a kidney transplant can save her. But finding a donor, and the cost, we have nothing left, Kael. Nothing." His father's eyes, once so authoritative, now pleaded. It was a sight Kael never thought he would witness. Then the true climax of the moment descended. Kael went to his mother's bedside. Lady Isabella lay pale and frail, a stark shadow of the elegant woman he remembered. Her breath was shallow, her face drawn. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not the mother who had overlooked him, but simply a human being in immense suffering. The old hurt, the quiet longing, seemed to recede, replaced by a profound, primal instinct. This was his mother. "I will be tested," Kael stated, his voice calm and firm, cutting through the heavy air of the sick room. He didn't ask for permission, didn't seek gratitude. It was a statement of intent, born of an immediate, unyielding certainty. Lord Alaric, who had followed him in, gasped, "Kael, you would?" Kael turned, his gray eyes meeting his father's. "She is my mother." The simplicity of the statement held more power than any elaborate explanation. It was a stark reminder of a bond that, though often ignored, had never been truly severed. The tests were conducted with swift urgency. The hospital, a gleaming edifice of modern medicine, felt miles away from the crumbling manor. Kael underwent a battery of examinations. Days later, the doctor, a kindly man with a weary expression, delivered the news. "Mr. von Kaelen," he said, consulting his charts, "the results are in. You are a perfect match, a rare and fortunate alignment. Your mother, she has a chance." A perfect match. The words echoed in Kael's mind. A twist of fate, an ironic alignment. The son deemed unfavored was the one who held the key to his mother's survival. Back at the manor, the atmosphere was a mix of desperate hope and profound shame. Matthias and Alara, their faces streaked with tears and worry, watched Kael with a bewildered awe. They had tried everything, exhausted all options, and now the one they had dismissed was offering the ultimate sacrifice. "Kael," Matthias stammered, his usual confidence shattered. We don't know what to say. We have nothing to offer you in return." Alara, clutching a damp handkerchief, added, her voice barely a whisper, "It's too much. After everything, you would still do this?" Kael looked at them, his gaze soft but unwavering. "There is nothing to return. This is not a transaction." He knew, intimately, the burden of their unspoken guilt, the weight of their past indifference. But he offered no judgment, no accusation. His actions were his answer. The doctors then revealed the immense cost of the surgery and post-operative care, a figure that made Lord Alaric visibly flinch. It was a sum that far exceeded anything the family could hope to scrape together. The specter of total ruin loomed larger than ever. Kael listened patiently, his mind already calculating. When the doctor finished, he spoke, his voice calm and resolute. "Do not worry about the finances, doctor. I will cover all expenses." And regarding the outstanding debts of Lord Alaric, Kael turned to his father, who looked at him with dazed disbelief. "Kael, you can't. That's everything." "It's done," Kael simply stated, his expression unyielding. He had no desire for credit, no need for lavish thanks. His decision had been made in the quiet chambers of his own heart, long before he had set foot back in the manor. It was a quiet act of redemption, not for himself, but for a family that had, in its own way, lost its path. He had walked away with nothing, built an empire, and now he was using that empire to rebuild what they had lost, not just their wealth, but perhaps their very essence. As he prepared for the surgery, the cold surgical instruments gleaming under the stark hospital lights, Kael felt a strange sense of peace.
He was not just saving a life, he was, in a profound and unexpected way, beginning to heal a fractured family, one selfless act at a time. The true cost of his gift, he knew, would only begin to be understood in the chapters to come. The man who had been given nothing was now giving everything. The sterile scent of the hospital room clung to the air like a shroud, but beneath its clinical facade, a different kind of alchemy was at work. Kael lay recuperating, a thin white sheet covering his bandaged side, the faint hum of medical equipment his constant companion. The physical discomfort was a dull throb, easily managed. Far more profound, more resonant, was the subtle shift in the atmosphere around him, a silent yet powerful current of change that swirled through the von Kaelen family. Lady Isabella, still weak but visibly stronger with each passing day, watched Kael with a gaze that held a newfound intensity. Her eyes, once prone to distant contemplation, now seemed to cling to her every movement, tracing the lines of her face, as if seeing him truly for the first time. The silence between them was no longer one of indifference, but of a heavy, unspoken understanding. One afternoon, as Kael was gazing out the window at the distant city skyline, his mother reached out a trembling hand and gently touched his arm. Her touch was feather-light, yet it sent a jolt through him, a sensation so foreign, so unexpected, that he almost flinched. "Kael," she whispered, her voice still hoarse, a fragile echo of its former elegance. "My son." The words, simple as they were, carried the weight of years, of a lifetime of missed connections. A single tear tracked a path down her pale cheek. I don't know how to begin to thank you, or how to apologize." Kael turned, his gray eyes meeting hers. There was no anger, no accusation in their depths, only a quiet calm that seemed to disarm her. "There is no need for thanks, Mother," he replied, his voice soft, almost a murmur, "and no need for apologies. It is done." But Lady Isabella shook her head, a slow, deliberate movement. "No, Kael, it is not done. Not for me. Every breath I take, every beat of my heart, is a reminder of your sacrifice and of our blindness." Her voice cracked with emotion. "We saw only what we wished to see. We built a life, a legacy, on expectations, and in doing so, we overlooked the greatest treasure we had." Her gaze drifted to the window, lost in a distant, painful memory. "I remember the day you drew that dragonfly, so intricate, so full of life, and I barely saw it. I was so caught up in everything else. Ilara's clumsiness, Matthias's boisterousness, they were easy to understand. You, Kael, you were always a mystery to me. A quiet depth I was too afraid or too complacent to explore." Her words were a torrent, a dam breaking after decades of silent yearning. Kael listened, his heart, once a guarded fortress, now a permeable wall, allowing the raw emotion to seep in. He saw not just his mother, but a woman wrestling with a lifetime of regret, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her, revealing a vulnerability he had never imagined. Lord Alaric, once the unyielding patriarch, now frequented Kael's room with a tentative deference that was almost heartbreaking. The once imposing figure now seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders, his pride shattered, replaced by a profound humility. He spoke haltingly of the financial ruin, of the deals gone sour, the trusted advisors who had betrayed him. He spoke of his despair, his fear of losing everything. I thought I was protecting you, Kael," Lord Alaric confessed one evening, his voice raspy, his gaze fixed on his clasped hands. "By not burdening you with the estate, I believed I was giving you freedom. allowing you to pursue your studies. I truly believed you would find your own way, and I foolishly thought that was enough, that your silence was contentment. I never imagined the depths of your capability or your generosity." He paused, a painful cough racking his frame. "I took pride in Matthias's strength, Ilara's grace, and I mistook your quiet strength for a lack of need. I saw a different path for you, Kael, but in doing so, I closed my eyes to the path you were already forging." He looked up, his eyes, once so sharp, now cloudy with a mixture of shame and dawning realization. "The debts, Kael. How did you... Why?" Kael met his father's gaze, a gentle understanding passing between them. "The debts were merely numbers, father, easily settled. The manor, the land, they are part of our family's story. They are not merely assets, but a legacy. And I could not stand by and watch that legacy and your spirit be extinguished." It was a subtle acknowledgement that his actions stemmed not from a desire to reclaim what was denied, but to preserve what truly mattered. The most striking transformation, however, occurred with Ilara and Matthias. They visited Kael daily, no longer with awkward pity, but with a raw, undeniable admiration. Ilara, known for her frivolous pursuits, would bring him small, thoughtful gifts, a rare book, a perfectly brewed cup of tea. Matthias, usually reserved and self-assured, would sit by his bedside, his broad shoulders hunched, asking Kael for advice on managing the remnants of the family business, listening intently, no trace of his former arrogance. "Kael," Ilara began one afternoon, her voice soft, her golden curls falling over her face as she leaned in. I remember that day, when father announced the inheritance. I felt triumphant and guilty. I didn't understand why you didn't fight, why you just left. I thought you didn't care. Now I see, it wasn't indifference. It was strength, a quiet strength we never had." She took his hand, her fingers surprisingly warm against his. "We were so blind, so selfish. We had everything, and you, with nothing, have given us more than we ever deserved." Matthias, his face etched with newfound humility, confessed, "I always saw you as the scholar, Kael, the one who lived in books. I never saw the fire in your belly, the steel in your spine. I looked down on your quiet nature, thinking it was weakness. I was wrong, so terribly wrong. You built an empire with bare hands, while I merely inherited a crumbling one. And then you saved us, all of us." He swallowed hard, his gaze unwavering. "You are the true heir of the von Kaelen name, Kael, not by birthright, but by character." Their words were like a balm, slowly healing old wounds. Kael watched them, truly listening to their confessions, sensing the genuine remorse in their voices. This wasn't merely gratitude, it was a profound realization, a shattering of their preconceived notions, a painful yet liberating awakening. They were no longer the spoiled siblings of his past, but humbled individuals, stripped bare of their arrogance and forced to confront the true meaning of family. This was the critical turning point, the true unveiling of hearts. The family, fractured by generations of subtle bias and overt neglect, was beginning to knit itself back together, stitch by painful stitch. The old manor, once a symbol of his exclusion, now felt like a place of potential reunion. Kael saw a future where, perhaps, just perhaps, they could be a true family. Not the idealized, picture-perfect family of childhood dreams, but a real, imperfect one, forged in the fires of adversity and rebuilt on the bedrock of rediscovered love and profound gratitude. As Lady Isabella was deemed well enough to return to the manor, a sense of quiet triumph filled the hospital room. Kael, though still recovering, felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. The air, once thick with the scent of medicine, now seemed to carry the faint, sweet promise of reconciliation. The journey from unfavored son to family savior had been long, arduous, and punctuated by silent sacrifices. But as he watched his family, humbled and contrite, gather around his mother's bedside, months after Lady Isabella's successful surgery and Kael's quiet, decisive obliteration of the von Kaelen family's crushing debts, life at the manor began to breathe again, not with the strained gasps of a dying ember, but with the steady, warming pulse of a rekindled flame. The cold, ancient stones seemed to absorb the newfound warmth emanating from within its walls. The opulent silence that once echoed Kael's loneliness was gradually replaced by the gentle hum of renewed activity, the soft murmur of conversations, and sometimes the hesitant laughter that had been missing for decades. Lady Isabella's recovery was slow but steady, a testament not only to Kael's sacrifice, but also to the meticulous care she now received from a family transformed. Her complexion, once ashen, now held a faint blush, and her eyes, though still carrying the shadow of past illness, were alight with a clarity and tenderness Kael had never witnessed directed at him. She began to spend hours in his company, not speaking of grand estates or societal obligations, but of small, intimate things, the changing seasons, the flight of birds, the quiet joys of a life nearly lost. These were conversations Kael had once yearned for, threads of connection he thought forever severed. They were the true reparations, far more valuable than any inheritance. Lord Alaric, stripped of his former imperiousness, was a man reborn in humility. The weight of his financial ruin, compounded by the profound realization of his son's selfless act, had carved new lines of wisdom on his face. He no longer spent his days poring over ledgers, but often sought out Kael in the quiet moments of the afternoon. He would ask Kael's advice on the remaining family affairs, listening with an almost childlike deference. It was in these conversations, in the exchange of ideas and the humble seeking of counsel, that a new kind of father-son bond began to form. It was not the bond of blood and lineage that had defined their past, but a stronger, more enduring one, built on respect, gratitude, and a shared understanding of life's harsh lessons. Lord Alaric saw Kael not just as his son, but his savior, his teacher, and perhaps most profoundly, his moral compass. Matthias, the proud eldest son, underwent the most visible metamorphosis. The burden of the near-lost estate, combined with the sheer audacity of Kael's rescue, had shattered his carefully constructed arrogance. He threw himself into the task of rebuilding the family businesses, but now with a stark humility that surprised everyone, including himself. He sought Kael's guidance relentlessly, not out of obligation, but genuine need. He would travel to the city, spending days in Kael's thriving enterprise, observing, learning, absorbing Kael's quiet efficiency and visionary approach. He saw now that true strength lay not in inherited power, but in earned competence and unyielding integrity. The rivalry that once simmered between them had dissolved, replaced by a genuine camaraderie, a brotherhood forged in the crucible of adversity. Alara, once the epitome of aristocratic indulgence, found herself drawn to Kael's quiet strength. She had volunteered at the hospital during her mother's recovery, witnessing firsthand the raw vulnerability of human suffering, a stark contrast to her sheltered upbringing. She began to express her gratitude to Kael not just in words, but in small, thoughtful gestures. She would bring him his favorite tea, ensure his favorite books were at hand, or simply sit with him in companionable silence. The superficiality that had once defined her began to peel away, revealing a budding compassion and a surprising capacity for genuine affection. She saw that Kael's quietness was not a void, but a reservoir of profound empathy and resilience. The grand climax of the family's transformation came during the annual Autumn Festival, a tradition that had always been a hallmark of the von Kaelen family standing. In previous years, it had been a showcase of wealth and status, a stage for Lord and Lady von Kaelen to parade their privileged children. This year, however, felt different.
The manor, still grand but visibly lived in, pulsed with a quiet energy that transcended mere opulence. Kael, usually a periphery figure at such gatherings, found himself at the heart of it. He stood beside his parents, not as a guest, but as an integral pillar. Lady Isabella, her health remarkably restored, her hand clasped firmly in Kael's, her eyes shining with unshed tears, addressed the assembled guests. "For many years," she began, her voice clear and strong, "we believed our legacy was in our lands, our name, our fortunes. We nurtured what we thought was important, and in doing so, we almost lost what truly mattered." Her gaze, full of profound regret and an even profounder love, rested on Kael. "This man, my son, Kael, whom I so grievously underestimated, he not only saved my life, but saved this family. He showed us that true wealth lies not in what one inherits, but in what one builds, not in what one receives, but in what one gives, unconditionally." A hush fell over the crowd. Lord Alaric stepped forward, his hand resting on Kael's shoulder. "We, the von Kaelen family, stand here today, humbled and forever indebted to Kael. He built his own empire from nothing, and when we had lost everything, he emptied that empire to save us. He is the true strength of this house, the unwavering anchor in our storm." Then, a surprising gesture. Matthias, stepping forward, presented Kael with an ornate, hand-carved wooden box. "Kael," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "this is a deed to a parcel of land, not part of the ancestral estate, but a new acquisition, fertile and promising. It is a gift, Kael, not an inheritance, a symbol of our gratitude and a recognition of the value you bring to this family. We wish for you to build your own legacy here, beside us, in full partnership, as equals." Alara then offered him a simple, elegant silver locket. "And this," she whispered, her eyes shining, "is a reminder that you are always, always in our hearts, no matter where life takes you." Kael looked at the deed, then at the locket, then at his family. The gifts were not about monetary value. They were symbols. Symbols of recognition, of acceptance, of love finally given freely. The profound contrast between the 10-year-old boy who had walked away with nothing and the man now receiving such heartfelt offerings was a testament to the long, arduous journey of transformation, not just his own, but his family's. He felt a warmth spread through him, a feeling far deeper and more satisfying than any financial gain. It was the warmth of belonging, the embrace of a family finally seeing him, truly seeing him, for who he was. "Thank you," Kael said, his voice rich with emotion, a genuine smile gracing his lips. It was a smile that reached his gray eyes, filling them with a light that had long been dormant. "But the greatest gift is this moment, this family." The festival continued, but for Kael, the true celebration had already taken place. He circulated among the guests, no longer the quiet shadow, but a respected and cherished member of the von Kaelen family. He spoke of his enterprises, his travels, his visions, and people listened, captivated not just by his success, but the quiet humility that still defined him. The old scars of neglect remained, faint etchings on his soul, but they no longer bled. They were reminders of a past endured, a past that had forged him into the man he had become. The Von Kaelen Manor, once a symbol of disparity, now stood as a testament to redemption. Kael, the unfavored son, had not merely survived, he had thrived. He had not merely given, but, through his profound selflessness, received the greatest gift of all, the unconditional love and acceptance of his own family. The circle was unbroken, healed by sacrifice and forgiveness. The final tableau was not one of inherited power, but of earned respect, not of past grievances, but of a future built on genuine affection. And in the quiet corners of the manor, the whispers of centuries past now carried a new, harmonious melody, the song of a family, finally, truly.
Dear listeners, as the final echoes of The Unfavored Son fade, we hope this journey has stirred something profound within you. Kael's story is a powerful testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit, a vivid reminder that true worth is not measured by inheritance, but by integrity, not by what we receive, but by what we are willing to give. It teaches us the profound lesson that even in the face of deep-seated injustice, compassion can triumph over bitterness, and sacrifice can pave the way for true redemption. It's a testament to the idea that love, though sometimes dormant, can always be rekindled. What resonates most with you from Kael's journey? We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more tales that explore the depths of the human experience. Thank you for listening.